So you've just gone through the most important chapter where everything comes together. At this point here, you really want to make sure that you understand this chapter well, because it's going to be one of the main chapters focused on the final exam. So you want to understand money supply, money demand, what shifts money supply, what shifts money demand, what kind of monetary equilibrium we have. But then afterwards, you really want to focus on fiscal versus monetary policy. So remembering the transmission mechanisms of each, well, fiscal policy is pretty straightforward. It's an increase in government spending or a decrease in taxes, which then influences aggregate demand. It's pretty direct. Whereas monetary policy, it's a drop in interest rates or an increase in money supply. They both move together in that case. Like, you can't influence one without the other. So we often just talk about dropping interest rates. Well, a drop in interest rates, the goal is one, the investment rate channel, which is essentially drop in interest rates will lead to higher levels of investment, and that then influences aggregate demand. But there's also the idea that lower interest rates will drop the value of the currency, which will increase exports and drop the level of imports, which is the exchange rate channel. So by both of those channels, drop in interest rates should stimulate aggregate demand. Some people argue that a drop in interest rate doesn't really change investment all that much. Well, okay, maybe that channel doesn't work in some instances, but if the exchange rate channel works as well, a drop in interest rates can still have an influence. Then if you compare and contrast the two, you have to note that monetary policy, it can be infinite in the sense that you can always keep interest rates lower, you can always print more money, leading to hyperinflation. Whereas fiscal policy, you'll never have the problem of hyperinflation, because even if you stimulate the economy a lot, leading to inflationary pressures, you can't continuously increase government spending and drop taxes. Even though you might try, eventually you're going to hit what many countries have hit, which is essentially a situation where they're way too indebted, that essentially they can't borrow anymore from other countries because they're in a very bad credit situation. So essentially, there is a limit with fiscal policy. You also want to compare the two and understand the different lags involved. So we saw with fiscal policy that once you implement a change in government spending or a change in taxes, it has a very quick impact on the economy. But where the slow part comes is that it's very slow for government to change their spending or to change their taxes. If you look at Canada or the States, there's a lot of procedures going along. Sometimes it might just be negotiated a budget season, but otherwise it has to be passed. Parties have to agree and stuff like that. So it takes a certain amount of time. There's a certain administrative lag. Whereas monetary policy, since they meet 8 times per year, so at most you have to wait a month and a half. And normally if you've decided to keep interest rates at a certain rate, you won't change your mind the next day, but at most you'll wait a month and a half. And often it will be just a matter of weeks or whatever that you can change interest rates. But once you change interest rates, it's not as if you're going to drop interest rates by 0.5% and all of a sudden everyone's going to buy a house. Everyone's going to buy this. Everyone's going to buy that. It takes a bit of time. Like, a lot of those decisions happen in the longer term, especially for businesses that make investment decisions. And there's other things such as the well-being of the economy that have an impact on investments. So it's not as clear cut. The change in interest rates may happen quick, but the rest may happen a little bit slower. So we have to understand the different lags involved in both of those cases, and understand why some people argue towards one, why some argue towards another. Some people could say, well, why don't we just choose one or the other if one's better? It all depends what situation you're in, what's your country's situation. In some recessions that we've had, fiscal policy was superior. In other recessions that we've had, monetary policy has been superior. So it's really trying to guess at that point which one has the biggest impact. And we've also talked about the multiplier effect, the whole idea that if government spending increases by an extra dollar, what kind of multiplying effect will this have as this dollar is spent, creates revenue for someone else who spends more, who creates revenue for someone else who spends more, and so on. So make sure that that's clear, the calculation, basic calculation of it all is clear to you.